Awesome. Well, thanks very much, Jay, and the entire team. Really excited to be here. Hard to follow up. John Miller, have been following him for years, and the smartest guy in pretty much every room. So excited to hear his thoughts on this, and excited to be able to share with you here as well. I have 30 minutes. I wanted to walk you through. I want to take a step back a little bit, and I'm going to share my screen so you can see some slides here. I want to take a step back a little bit and talk about what I think marketing is going to look like in. See if I can do this. Here we go. What marketing is going to look like in 2 or 3 years and how to get ready for it now. As we talk about AI and the impact it's going to have in our businesses, I think it's going to be a sea change tactically, strategically, but it's still a tool. And so how are we as humans, how are we as professionals, how are we artists and craftsmen going to continue to innovate what we do using AI, but also using the opportunities around us? So I've got a few things I want to talk about where I think marketing is going to look like in 3 years. But I want to start with what we've always sort of looked at as the future. Some of you know that this is the Jetsons. The Jetsons was a TV show that started in 1962. If I asked you, I would show a hands or maybe in the comments, like when do you think the Jetsons took place? The show The Jetsons was in the future. It was everybody living in these clouds. It was lots of innovative future things. Just to get to the quick of it, the Jetsons took place 100 years after the show started. It took place in 2062, and George Jetson in that show was 40 years old. So we're not yet at George Jetson time. This isn't like Back to the Future where we were supposed to already have our hoverboards. But George Jetson, ladies and gentlemen, is alive today. He is an infant, and he is alive. Sometimes we get visions of the future right. Like this was actually an artist rendering of what the future could look like in 1930. There were no televisions in 1930. The 30s was about radio. The 40s was about the proliferation of television. So the idea that someone conceived of having a telephone where you could see someone in the screen while you're drinking apparently either a shandy or some kind of lemonade, pretty amazing, right? The flying plane in the back, maybe not so much, but this was pretty dead on. This was not. So this is from 1900. They asked people to sort of say what we could be doing. These were balloon-supported people walking on lakes. So just to be clear, this person thought in the year 2000 we would attach balloons to our feet and use those to walk across lakes. So I don't know. There's all kinds of things I think could be wrong with that. But moving on, like we always like to think about what the future is going to look like. Sometimes we are right. Sometimes we are not right. But here's something interesting about when we think about and look at the future. This is Pascal Finette, and I encourage you to go check him out. He's a great writer about innovation. And he says quite often, he talks about what innovation has happened in the past and what innovation is coming up ahead of us. And he's right when he says the innovation of the past currently appears far flatter. That innovation curve appears flatter than it actually was. And the innovation curve moving forward appears far steeper than it will be. When we look at the past, when you look at what has happened just in the last 10 or 15 years, the things we now take for granted, the power embedded in this little device that we just take for granted that we use on an everyday basis is phenomenal. And when we look into the future, we see what's coming, or we think we see what's coming, and it's scary. I get it. It's scary to think about where this can go. I was at the Marketing AI conference a couple weeks ago, and a gentleman from University of Pennsylvania was on screen saying, we don't know, maybe robots will try to kill us. It's kind of terrifying if you let yourself spiral into anxiety that way. But the innovation of the future, we will be able to be on top of that. And your opportunity, if we're open and creative and thinking about what that could be, if we're open to new ideas and open to how that might change our world and change our lives, we can be successful. And that's what this is about for me, is saying, okay, in just 3 years, what do we think marketing could look like? And how do we get ready? So I've got a few things I want to walk through. The first is this idea of prioritizing owned versus rented land. If you're frustrated that the algorithms continue to change on LinkedIn, on search, on Twitter or X or whatever we call it, you're right. There's for sure leverage that opportunity, but know that rented land is fleeting. You don't have control of the price. You don't have control of the rules. You don't have control of the algorithms. And I believe the companies that win in the future are going to prioritize their own land. They're going to invest in building that attention over time. This is everything from building your community to starting a podcast to getting to the point where you have your own audience that you can get. I remember starting my podcast a number of years ago, and I don't know, I still don't know exactly who's listening, but figuring, okay, well, I'm publishing these first few episodes and there literally is no audience. And after a few years, I started getting PR pitches. And many of you that have podcasts, you probably do as well. Like I get PR teams pitching their teams to be on that podcast. Like this is what happens over a series of years when you create content, when you create a following for your brand, for your business, for your content. If you think about your business as a media company first, this is where you start to think about, okay, how do I go from being interruptive to being irresistible? How do I create content? How do I create an opportunity that people want to be a part of? Your community opportunity as part of this is significant as well. We kind of stumbled in during the pandemic to this opportunity to create this CMO community. And here we are 3 years later, there's over 2,500 people in this community. Hundreds of people get together on a Friday. It's been a great community to be a part of. And it's when you can build and own and produce that kind of an opportunity and platform for people, like that is an asset. That is an asset that can sit on someone's balance sheet, for crying out loud. It's a huge opportunity and a huge part of who you are when you can earn the ongoing attention of your audience. So think about own versus rented land moving forward. I also think data is going to be more important than demand. I would say it is already more important than demand in terms of how we think about our programs moving forward. If you are selling into a finite market, you should know who your prospects are. You should have systems in place so that you can understand who those companies are and what are the signals you want to look for. Everything the light touches is a signal, whether it's an intent signal or a buying or a buying signal. What are your customers doing, and how does that help you imply when you should be in front of them? No one should be doing direct mail campaigns to your entire list anymore. No longer do we want to send 10,000 direct mail pieces at a time. You should send 10 this week, 12 the week after, 7 the week after that, 46 the week after that, based on things you observe in the market, based on not just the right message, but to the right person at exactly the right time. How are you thinking about using this as a way to build a domino effect for your customers, for your prospects? So you don't have to be in the right place, right time, and luck into that. When you send the 10,000 postcards or 100,000 emails and you get a microscopic response, you happen to get some of those emails in front of the right person at the right time. What if you could increase your precision while decreasing the amount of noise you're creating for your audience? This can be done through your direct campaigns. This can be done through your partner campaigns. Huge opportunity for you to use the data and the increased depth and quality of the data you have to create better connections, better quality campaigns, do more with less. I also think ecosystems and relationships are going to become far more important moving forward. The interactions you have with partners, I think partner campaigns in the past have always been a lot about sort of transactional. Who's got campaigns? We use tools like Reveal and Crossbeam to find our joint prospects, right? Well, what if we, instead of sort of having something where your end customer was the end result and you've got all these people trying to get their attention, what if you think about like who's surrounding that customer today? Like who are the people that have influence over them? How do you engage that ecosystem and those relationships well before someone's ready to buy? There's a way to integrate this approach with your own land approach as well, and to think about not just those that are transacting with them right now, but who also has their attention. What does that attention imply about the message you should have in front of that audience as well, right? So I'm moving pretty quickly because I wanted to touch on a lot of points here, but think more broadly about your ecosystem. Think about not just referral sales and not just pipeline of immediate deals, but how do you surround your prospect in a value-added way so they see the continuity of the value you can create for them with that partner. I think we're going to see a lot better balance between brand and demand moving forward. And I get that we're in a market right now where people are doing 3 times as much work and generating half the results. And it's really hard to build pipeline in the market we're in right now. You read the headlines and you hear people telling us that we're heading for a soft landing. Tell that to all the people that got laid off in Q1 in tech. Tell that to all the companies that are doing a lot more work and generating fewer results. We're in a ghost recession right now, whether we want to call it that or not. But we're going to get into a place where we're going to have a lot more companies that are spending more money on brand. I really like what Smartsheet has done with Formula One. This is a very strategic opportunity that they have pursued to increase awareness and intent in international markets. They're doing some really cool stuff where they're not putting their logo on the side of the car. In specific strategic markets, they're putting a partner logo. So right there underneath where it says Android, where it would have otherwise said Smartsheet, it says Deadly Science. What is Deadly Science? Well, they put this on the side of the race car during the Australian Grand Prix. Deadly Science is a non-profit in Australia that's focused on helping increase STEM education among Aboriginal children. So it's helping kids get more STEM, more science and math education. And so there was an awareness and fundraising for that organization that also drove value for Smartsheet, and they've repeated that in various different markets. So it's Smartsheet sponsorship, doing good in the market. There's a PR benefit. There's an awareness benefit. I guarantee you there is a sales benefit and a customer success benefit as well. The CMO of Smartsheet, when they kicked off this campaign, went to the board and said, we will not measure this program on pipeline. We will benefit from this program in pipeline, but we are measuring this based on awareness, based on intent, based on PR values. And so we're going to see more of this moving forward, where not everything is just focused on what kind of pipeline did it generate, because that is a short-term mentality that creates I think a premium on price of what you're able to generate. The more you can invest in brand, in community, in ecosystems, it puts downward pressure on the economics of your pipeline. Over time, your pipeline becomes more efficient as you invest in that owned land as well. We already know that buying committees are complicated today. I think they're going to get way more complicated as more people are involved in the process, as more outside vendors and influences sort of engage with folks. I mean, sort of today, hopefully many of you are already thinking about your enterprise target as all these different people that have to get engaged in the process. God bless the folks at Gartner for making it seem even more complicated, where we've got all these different like lines and squiggles going all the way all over the place. But it's not just the depth and complexity of the buying committee that we have to worry about here. It's also the nature of what people care about. Here's some research that is literally 5 years old, but it's if anything, it's exacerbated today. We did some research with a company called SnapApp to learn what the millennials are looking for. How do millennials operate in the process? And we know from further research since then that millennials and Gen Z employees are increasingly part of the buying committee. What do they care about? Like if you're going to the table and saying we want to give you a demo and show you why our features are better than our competitors, or why we have more features than our competitors do, which is what a lot of demos and a lot of sales processes do. Product features are at the bottom of this list, my friends. The top two things millennials care about when they're choosing a vendor is community involvement and company values. Who are you? What value are you creating for the world? Do your values align with mine? So now, I mean, look, it's B2B. You would imagine people are making logical decisions, but we are still thinking about, we're still making decisions based on emotional cues as well. Brent Adamson does a great job of talking about the identity elements and considerations in buying journeys, right? If someone's going to buy something, what does that purchase say about them? How does affiliation with your brand impact their identity? It's something you have to think about, especially as the younger folks start to become more and more influential as part of the buying committee. Too often, I think in B2B, we approach things from a campaign standpoint, from a channel standpoint. How well is email working? How well is search working? How well is field marketing working? Your prospects expect this to be on more of an omni-channel approach moving forward. It's not just I'm approaching all these different channels. It's how all the channels we operate work in concert with each other. Yes, this is far more complex to operate than we have before, but your customers expect it. When your prospects are crazy busy, when they don't have time to read your emails, when they aren't paying attention to individual messages, it's hard to sort of get across your message and build continuity and build momentum if it's a different message and a different sequence and a different approach across these different channels. You have to have an omni-channel approach to make this work. It relates to the way we think about the funnel as well. Right? The funnel no longer works just in a linear way. I think a flywheel is a far better way of thinking about how the funnel operates. Right? And even that funnel that we see marketing, sales, customers, like even that's archaic to say that like marketing first, then sales. We don't split that funnel horizontally anymore. If anything, if you're going to use a funnel model like on the right or on the left, you got to split that funnel vertically with a diagonal bent, where marketing may own more of the work at the top and sales may have the majority of the tasks at the bottom, but it is a partnership. And a better way to think about the omni-channel approach that isn't just your marketing channels, isn't just your sales channels, but it's every touch point you have with your customers. It's a flywheel. You have to coordinate that effort. When you have a seamless approach to not only just your engagements in your channels, but your message, you increase velocity and commitment from prospects. It is such a better way of standing out because so few companies do this well today. You can nail this. You will be a step ahead of your competitors for a very long time. We may someday, guys, get to a point where robots sell to robots. I don't see that happening anytime soon. I think there's a difference when you think about what AI can accomplish for us between jobs and tasks. There's a lot of tasks that need to get done today that happen manually that we want robots to do. There's a lot of tasks that we have asked that I think about, like sometimes my dad who has passed, he was in marketing and sales for Caterpillar Tractor for a long time. I remember once asking him, like, what was your job before having a computer? Like, I can't imagine doing my job without some kind of a computer, whether it's my laptop or a phone. He says, I was doing the same stuff, but like I didn't have email. I didn't have rev marks. I had a piece of paper and a red pencil that I would mark up with ad copy. I had a bunch of memos that I had to respond to. We didn't think it was slow because we couldn't send it instantaneously. And there was a bunch of stuff that had to be done manually that today we just take for granted are done virtually, are done by machines, by code, by robots. Even today, I mean, like it's funny. Like I put some of these slides together just a couple months ago, and they already feel a little old. Like the idea that you ever have to write a shitty first draft of anything, like writer's block is extinct now, isn't it? The fact that you have an idea of what you want to get, and like your first job as a writer is just to get something on page that you can edit. Like robots do that for you now. It doesn't mean that writers are going extinct. It means that writers can now focus on what writers do best, which is the idea, the editing, the polishing of the final product. We still need artists and craftsmen to finish this work. Jobs versus tasks is how you want to think about this moving forward. I think the more we can get the robots to do the hard work, to do the deeper work, to dig into data that we couldn't look at before, to identify the trends and have those initial insights that we didn't have before, until robots sell to robots, I still want that insight. I want that hard work done so that I can be human, so that I can come across as human to my prospects. I don't do that by sending the same email to 10,000 people. I do that by having one-on-one conversations separately 10,000 times. AI is going to enable that. It's already enabling components of that today. It's allowing humans to be more human, and that's a very exciting thing to come. All right. There are already plenty of companies I know today that are decreasing their demand gen budget and increasing resources into sales enablement. If you sell into a niche market, we have a client that sells into the pharmaceutical space, and their entire addressable market is 142 companies. Like they don't need to go own paid search. You know, they can play an SEO game, but like they know exactly who they need to be selling to. And so the job is not necessarily to go and generate as many leads as possible. The job is to engage your prospects in a relationship and enable your sales team and your partners and your ecosystem to do that as well. I think we need to think differently about just more and more leads and more about like the engagement we have with the right prospects. How are we generating the right conversations at the right time? Being more efficient doesn't mean we're being more effective. Generating more leads doesn't mean you're being more effective. How do you think about not just the leads generated, but the rules of engagement inside the sales organization? The right message at the right time. If you see one lead from a company and you see a second or third lead coming from a company, how to use that as an accelerator, not a dedupe. There's still tons of companies, maybe some of you on the call today, maybe you have rules set up that you didn't know that you still had that actually are killing those second and third leads because they're seen as duplicates, when in fact those should be accelerators, right? So thinking about the sales enablement component of doing this well. Another way to think about this is the idea of the messy middle. A lot of companies good at driving demand, good at managing the pipeline, but that messy middle, what happens when a lead is generated? What happens when someone raises their hand or shows an intent signal? When we get better at identifying and reading and communicating intent signals, we have to get far more effective and far more precise at how the leads are followed up on. Hey, I saw that you did something yesterday. Would you like to see a demo? Hey, I saw that you were in our webinar yesterday. Would you like to see our capabilities presentation? And you have to make sure you're measuring and responding to the right thing. Just because someone went to your last 3 webinars doesn't mean that they're qualified. It might mean that they are bored. What are the signals you're looking for? How are you helping your salespeople be effective? The age-old problem in sales has not changed. It's the answer to two questions. Who do I talk to next, and what do I talk about? Right? How are you using your signals? How are you using your data? How are you using AI to create better conversations around all that? I actually wrote this morning about the idea that documentation is one of the most important things you can do as a marketer today. I hate process. Let me just be clear. I am not a process guy. I used to think it was draconian. I like to be agile. I like to sort of be creative. I now have learned that process and documentation unlocks creativity and innovation. It allows you to take things that need to be done and you do them consistently, you do them predictably. You can take things that were manual and you can automate them. You can take things that people used to do and have robots do them. The better you can outline the programs that work, the more likely you can create a center of excellence in your organization that is focused on the right things. The more you document how things should work, the more likely those things are going to work, and the more likely you can focus on what really needs help, which is the dirty details. What does our offer look like? What is the conversation that needs to happen? How do you make sure that all of your ideas get vetted the right way and get to execution correctly? How many of you, are banging your head on the wall on a regular basis when a great idea in a brainstorm, once it gets to execution, is not anywhere close to what you wanted it to be or what you thought it should be? A center of excellence helps with that. And as you add complexity to the buying journey, as you add complexity to the way that the buyers buy and your sellers sell, because remember, like we talk often about the buying committee and how the buying committee continues to grow. The selling community is growing as well. Inside your organization, the number of people that are touching new customers, if you're engaging in an ecosystem, it grows as well. So the more you can think about not just sort of centralizing this around you, but creating and investing in a decentralized role where your partners in the ecosystem can talk to each other. If you did this without a center of excellence, if you did this without a documented process, it would be chaos. But if everyone is following the same system, if they are all following the same rules, if they're all engaging in the same playbook, you can offer a more agile, a more flexible program that is decentralized, that allows people to focus on the right work, but do it effectively and consistently over time. There are going to be new rules that don't exist today that we're going to migrate into. Some of this is still, as AI continues to evolve, kind of hard to figure out. Again, like I built this presentation a couple of months ago. I'm not sure prompt engineer is necessarily going to be one of those now. I think where AI might get to the point where AI does and optimizes the prompt engineering for us. But certainly right now we're seeing roles that include not just using AI, but how to ask AI better questions, how to edit what AI produces, how to minimize the amount of hallucination that happens from AI. We're going to see a lot more of that in the next couple of years, let alone 3 years from now. I think we're certainly going to see this ecosystem manager. I don't know. You type in ecosystem manager into Google. This is the picture you get. It's awful. It reminds me of if anyone saw, was it Corporate? What was that Comedy Central show from a couple of years ago? But I think that instead of like a partner manager today tends to be very transactional, tends to focus on people that can actually get us leads and share pipeline. I think we're going to have ecosystem managers that are thinking in that broader sort of universe of people that surround the customer. And this will be seen as equivalent to a marketing channel. I think this is going to see a lot more of this. I also think the BDR role is going to be completely turned around. I've heard some people say AI is going to replace the BDR, that all our BDRs are going to be replaced by robots that can have that first conversation. Well, first of all, if you're doing that because the AI-driven BDR is cheaper and faster, that's not the problem to be solved. What that's going to generate is even more phone calls and outreach to these busy prospects that don't like your message and don't have time for listening to you anyway. I think too often we treat the BDR as a coin-operated young person who's having the same conversation over and over again. It's just shoehorning people into appointments. I want the BDR moving forward and expect the BDR to be far more consultative, to be able to have a value-added conversation up front. What if I told the BDR in the first interaction you have with a prospect, you're not allowed to talk about your product or service? What questions are you going to ask? What insights are you going to bring up to help improve that prospect situation? How do you make it so that when you have that BDR conversation, the prospect hangs up the phone at the end and says, wow, that was really good. I would have paid for that. That's the level we expect as buyers. That's the level your buyers are going to want from you moving forward. AI is going to enable more of that because it's going to give you the insights to ask questions, to bring up ideas, to ask questions the prospect hadn't thought about before, but gives them something that you want and challenges their status quo. It'll be significant moving forward. I think traditionally we've thought about the customer journey as linear. It looks something like this. I believe the customer journey moving forward is going to be far more likely an infinite loop, where we think about prospects and customers as maybe that's the binary component, but the way that we engage the ecosystem is going to be significantly different. Imagine a world where the majority of your referrals come from your prospects, not your customers. Imagine a world where over time, your customers, the people at your customer organizations, move on to second, third, fourth different roles. How well today are you tracking that? I bet you most of you, your software, whatever software you're using for contacts, if it sees someone leaves a company, it follows that company and looks where they are next. Well, maybe where they go next is not a company you want to sell to. And in the meantime, who took their job at the last company that was important to you? How well are you managing that inside customer organizations today? I saw a stat recently that said if you can get up to 6 people from a customer organization actively engaged in the buying process, your win rates double. Well, that's kind of a no-dust statement until you look at your own CRM. I'm not talking about how many contacts you have in CRM. I'm talking about how many people are actively involved in that buying process. How many people have you gone into the buying committee actively talking together to reach consensus together? That's a whole different story. And last, before I wrap up here, I think fundamentals are going to matter more than ever before. We can talk about the role of AI. We can talk about ecosystems. We can talk about the importance of data becoming the coin of the realm and data replacing media as the most important asset for marketers moving forward. But thinking about the fundamentals of predictable pipeline, understanding who your target market is, nailing the message, the right person at the right time, really documenting that sales cycle and the process that your buyers and your sellers go through, making your program a strategy-led, not tool-led program. The technology supports the process, supports the strategy, not the other way around. And then getting better at the way we measure how all of this works. What we're describing here in the last 25 minutes is a far more complex system of operating a go-to-market motion. The tools and the metrics are going to help us implement and understand what's working. But the fundamentals around who you're selling to, what you say to them, and how you operationalize that program is going to matter more than ever before. Those are 12 things I think are already underway in terms of changing what marketing is going to look like in 2026. Boy, if we do this presentation again in 6-8 months, what's different? If we sit here a year from now and say, great, we're a third of the way to that. Are we closer to the Jetsons? Are we closer to bubbles and balloons on our feet walking across the lake? I think it's important to sort of have this view on a regular basis. Constantly change your perspective or say, like, here's what we got to get done right now. Here's what we have to nail. Here's what we got to achieve. And then what does 3 years look like from now? Next year, don't make it a 2-year window. Reset it to another 3-year window and look down the road at what you think might be. Give yourself the opportunity and the time to just imagine what that could look like, to engage in wonder without having to land the plane, without having to think about how do I turn this into pipeline right now. Give your team the opportunity to be creative and continue to brainstorm and think about where could this go. Out of that conversation, you can take the things that feel most relevant and figure out what would that mean for us right now? How does that change what we're doing right now? How could that be a priority next quarter, next year? But with a constant view of where the future is going and what's going to happen in the future, it allows us to be better in the present. It allows us to not be caught flat-footed and do it the right way. I want to thank again the team at Signals for putting this together, for inviting me to be part of this. It's been a pleasure. This is how to get a hold of me, and I'll hand the microphone back to Jenny and the team. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, for joining us. Very fun presentation, very engaging, and you managed to pack so much information into those 30 minutes. So thank you again. Hope you have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.